Hey, sixth graders. Today we're going to talk about volume, and we're going to answer 3 questions. We're going to answer the question, what is volume? How does volume differ from area? And what are the 3 ways that we can calculate volume? This is a review from your information that you learned in 5th grade, but we need that review because we're going to utilize this information to be able to answer more application questions in 6th grade. Okay, so this goes along with the standard 6.G.A.2, and we are finding the volume of a rectangular prism. So the first question is, what is volume? Volume is a measure of capacity within an object, and we're going to be talking specifically about the volume in a rectangular prism. So to find the volume in a rectangular prism, what we are doing is we are finding how many cubes, how many unit cubes can fit within a rectangular prism without any space left over. Now, we use a unit cube because we want all of the cubes to be the same size so that it is a standard measurement. For example, if we use some big and some little cubes together, then we wouldn't have a standard measurement of what the volume would be because we would have 2 different units of measure. Additionally, we use a cube instead of something round so that we don't have empty space left over that's not calculated. Now, when we're talking about finding volume, you can think about filling up a room with boxes or anything like that. The way that I like to refer to it in the real world is like a situation where you are packing containers of the same size into an 18-wheeler for shipment. So for example, we have a lot of manufacturing facilities in our area, and they ship furniture and other goods all around the nation and even the world. So if we were going to go to the warehouse at a local furniture factory and look at a shipment of sofas, maybe they were all the same size boxes, we would want to try to fit as many boxes as possible onto the trailer of that 18-wheeler so that we didn't have any empty space left over. If you have space left over, if maybe half your trailer's filled up, then you're paying another driver, you're paying extra gas mileage, you are not shipping all that you can effectively. So for example, I've drawn us a picture here of our 18-wheeler, and I want you to think about if we were trying to put as many boxes of the same size in here, that would be calculating volume. Now, one way that you could do that is you could literally take your same size boxes and pack a trailer as much as you possibly could and count how many boxes that you could use to fill that up. But you can also do that mathematically by measuring the volume of each box and then using that box to calculate the volume given the dimensions of that trailer without having to count the boxes. So when I think about volume and I think about you in 6th grade, you may be still asking the question, how is volume different from area? Because area is something that you calculate in 4th and 5th grade. You may remember that area is length times width. So there's 3 measurements that you see a lot. One of them is perimeter. And in perimeter, it's like calculating the outside of an area, like building a fence, okay? It's going around the outside of your yard. If you wanted to calculate the amount of grass that you needed to plant to go cover your yard on the inside, that would be area. You may also think about laying flooring in your house, like tile or getting a rug or a carpet or wood floors. That would all be a measure of area. Volume would be like if we were filling the entire room from top to bottom with boxes. That's where volume comes in. So volume is always going to be measured in units cubed, right here. Volume is always going to end in units cubed, and that's because our units are 3-dimensional, okay? The units that we are using to measure have 3 different dimensions. They have a length, a width, and a height, much like this Kleenex box has a length, width, and a height. Versus this sheet of paper is just a rectangle. It only has length and width. That's how these are different. 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional. So in this case, area is always going to be units squared because it only has 2 dimensions, where volume is always going to be units cubed because it has 3 dimensions. And those 3 dimensions are length, width, and height, where area only has length and width. Now, when we're thinking about ways to calculate volume, you probably learned to start out with to count the cubes that you see in a shape. Now, if you can see all the sides of the shape, then absolutely, you can count the cubes, much like packing the boxes into the 18-wheeler. If you want to count them, absolutely you can, because that's what you're looking for, is how many cubes fit into the space. However, sometimes you can't see all the sides, and then also sometimes you count all the faces individually and you get the wrong number. For example, this rectangular prism has the volume of 18, and that's because it has 6 on each level. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and both of the top levels have 6 as well. So I have 6 plus 6 is 12, plus 6 more is 18. Well, so one of the ways that I can calculate volume is to count each cube. But what if I don't have all the cubes? What if I just have the dimensions of the truck, right? Of the trailer? Well, then you have 2 options. You can either multiply length times width, and height together. That's the basic formula for volume, and that's something that you're probably familiar with from 5th grade. Or you can say base times height. And base is just another way to say length times width. So for example, if you'll look at this cube with me, when I think about base, I think about the bottom or the foundation. If this were an example of a 3-story home, the green part would be the bottom floor. And if I just counted the bottom floor and all the floors were the same, then I could just multiply by how many floors there are. So if I said, okay, what is my base? 1, 2, 3 times 2. Well, 3 times 2 is 6. Well, that was just length times width. So if I put in length and width here, I would get the same thing as base, because base is just length times width. Well, if I have 6 on each level and I have 3 levels, then that's 18, okay? So there are 3 ways to do volume, to calculate volume, and all of them will get you to the same answer. Now, I do want to relate this back to your, about how you solve equations using substitution, because that's really what volume problems can be if you can't count the cubes. So for example, if they give me the cubes, then I can count to find my variables, okay? So say that's the case. They give you this shape, you're given this shape, and they say, okay, find the volume. Well, you have to count. Your length is 3, your width is 2, your height is 3. Well, now, whether you counted the cubes to get your variables, or if they just are given to you in the question, now you substitute them in your formula. And anytime you're substituting in a formula, you rewrite the formula and then plug in. So I've got my formula here. Now I plug in my variables, or my values for each variable. And now I multiply. 3 times 2 is 6. 6 times 3 is 18. So my volume equals 18 units cubed. Again, it's cubed because there are 3 dimensions. Well, on this one, base times height, that's like counting that bottom layer and then multiplying by the height. So in our base, that's just a shorter way to write length times width, which is 6. 6 times 3. And if you'll remember, that's what we got when we counted this bottom floor here. We got 6, and there are 3 floors. 6 times 3 is 18 units cubed. Okay? So just as a quick recap, volume is a measure of capacity that fills an entire space all the way to the top. Volume is different from area because area is 2-dimensional length and width, and volume is 3-dimensional length, width, and height. And the 3 ways to calculate volume are to count the cubes, use the formula volume equals length times width times height, or to use the formula volume equals base times height. Be sure and check out our next video so that you can see how to apply this knowledge to solve volume questions.